My name is Michael Karnosh. I'm the Ceded lands manager, which means I work for the Confederated tribes of Grand Ronde here in Oregon. The Grand Ronde are the people that come from the original people of this area where we're standing right now. While the reservation, modern day, it's about, probably 50 miles from here, 40 or 50. This where we are is the home for the tribal people. It's the place where they come from which they were removed, and where their connections remained throughout history and throughout some really hard times, but they're actively coming back to these homeland areas and keeping those connections alive. This necklace that I'm wearing, it's a paddle, as you can see, and this was made by Tai Sam Robinson from the Chinook Indian Nation. They're the original people at and near the mouth of the Columbia River, and they're great friends and relatives of the Grand Ronde people. Sam Robinson made this to commemorate the type of paddle that was really common historically for the rivers and the backwater type areas. So you definitely would have seen a paddle like this in use on waters like the Lukiamute River. It's got, instead of a rounded kind of convex blade at the end, instead of that, it's got this little divot cut out of the end, and that's because when you're trying to move a canoe in and amongst all the riparian forests and all the brush and everything that's kind of sticking out, this makes a really useful kind of a prod tool. Like you can stick this into either a tree root or kind of push along from the mud or gravel and kind of keep your canoe in the best water that way. It's a little more useful for it. Might not have the same propelling power as like your more rounded blade, but it's way more useful in these backwater kind of stiller areas. So yeah, it's just a really cool necklace that Chief Sam Robinson made, and I'm really proud to wear it today. I think canoe culture is really making a strong comeback all over the Pacific Northwest, and that's a great thing because all of the people, any tribes within 100 or more miles of here, they're all gonna have a canoe heritage. Canoes were the way that people got around historically. These rivers and streams that we're on, they're the highways. They're the places, they're the ways that people get around. And not only do they and did they get themselves around, they also got their trade goods. They moved those around by canoe. So that's a really important part of the culture of the Kalapuya people, which is, the people right on the Willamette River where we're at right here. So I will focus for this next little bit on the Lukiamute band of Kalapuya people. They're the people right along the Lukiamute River, which is where we are right now. We're right at the mouth of the Lukiamute, and really special area. I'm not a tribal member. I've talked to a lot of tribal members, and what I know from those conversations, I can't put into words how much it means to have an ancestral connection to a place like this. It's just, it goes beyond description. So, but I'll pass on the parts that I know. And so let's start at the beginning. The Lukiamute are the original people of this Lukiamute drainage area, which comes down and includes the banks of the Willamette. Their economy, their creation stories all say that they were the people that were created here. They were put here when they were created. So they didn't come from somewhere else. They were actually created in this area. Their history goes back to time immemorial, which people that work with tribes a lot have probably hear that phrase a lot. And for folks that aren't familiar with it, it's a really powerful phrase, and it just means so far back that no one even remember. It's beyond human memory. It goes back to the time before, which refers to a time when the world was being made ready for humans to inhabit. So it truly is the time before, and anyhow, that's how far back the heritage of this place goes. The Lukiamute lived a very, by the standards of the Pacific Northwest, even a very affluent lifestyle. They had trade goods in great abundance. So the big trade good around here would be camas and camas cakes. So camas is a plant that's a member of the lily family. The bulb of the plant is the part that's eaten. It's super nutritious, has a lot of plant proteins, and of course carbohydrates. When it's roasted, when it's properly baked, those sugars that are in the bulb are incredibly available and useful for human beings. So the Lukiamute Kalapuya have vast fields of camas. They grow so much, they grow more than they can possibly eat. So they roast it, they pack it into cakes, wrap those cakes up. Those can keep for up to 3 years, and they, by canoe, ship those down the river to their neighbors, the Chinooks and other people that come to trade with the Chinooks. And in that way, they became really wealthy, and they had good relations with all their neighbors around here. Right across the Willamette River here, the Santiam band of Kalapuya were their neighbors, and then to the south, it was the Champinafu, or the Mary's River band of Kalapuya, and then to the north, it would have been the Yamhill band of Kalapuya. And all those relations were really good amongst the Kalapuya bands. When the first white people, the first Euro settlers and traders came into the area, the Kalapuya being here on the Willamette, they're right along one of the big trade networks of the Northwest. So kind of the main trade artery through the Northwest is the Columbia River. Because of the proximity up and down the Willamette, the Lukiamute Kalapuya had really ready access to trade goods along that trade network, and sadly, because of that, they caught European-born diseases really quickly, and it hit them really hard. So the estimates are that somewhere between 90 and 98% of all the Kalapuya people were killed by disease during about a 30-year span. This left them kind of, politically in a really disadvantaged situation. And around that same time, the United States was really eager to negotiate treaties with all the tribes around this area for a lot of different reasons. So there was a lot of different rounds of treaty negotiation that went on. It took at least 3 different tries before there was a treaty that got back to Washington D.C. and actually got ratified by Congress. So the first thing that the United States proposed was a reservation on the east side of the Cascades. They said, yeah, if you just agree to pick up and leave here and go over to this reservation on the east side of the Cascades, we'll make things easy for you. And all of the tribes around here just absolutely said no, that's a non-starter. We're not going to talk about that. So that ended that round of treaty negotiation. Later, around 1851, a couple of different treaty negotiating parties came through here for the United States. And for the Lukiamute, they negotiated a treaty that would have created a reservation just maybe like 6 miles or so to the west, in a place that today is called Airlie. So if you ever drive or ride your bike on Airlie Road, basically what you're driving is the old California Trail. And that old California Trail, for a piece of it, that marks the eastern boundary of what would have been the Lukiamute Reservation. And I've been there myself many times. It's a really, really beautiful place, very fertile area, and it's at a ferry location. The white settlers set up a ferry there on the southern fork of the Lukiamute, and it would have been a perfect place for Lukiamute Kalapuyans to put their canoes in the water and come down here and access the big water. So it would have been really perfect, but those treaties were signed, they were taken over to DC, and Congress said no, we're not going to ratify that treaty, because what Congress wanted at the time was they wanted all of the tribal people out of the Willamette Valley. They didn't want to ratify treaties that would leave them here at a reservation, even a very small reservation, which by comparison the Lukiamute would have been a fairly small reservation. But fast forward 4 years later, 1855, the United States had fired all of those other treaty negotiators and hired a man named Joel Palmer. Joel Palmer went around, and instead of negotiating with each individual tribe and band, he grouped them. So for the Willamette Valley, he grouped at least 15 different bands into a single treaty, which is known today as the Willamette Valley Treaty. And the Lukiamute chiefs signed that treaty. They didn't at the time realize how quickly things were going to happen, but the year after this treaty was signed, the Willamette Valley Treaty, the rogue wars over in southern Oregon really flamed up and really got very, very violent very quickly. The United States' strategy was to just clear everybody out. And so that was the Trail of Tears for most, if not all, of the Western Oregon tribes. The people of Western Oregon were rounded up at gunpoint and marched to different reservations. One of those reservations was Grand Ronde. Like I said, was about 40 or 50 miles from here. That was a very hard thing for tribal people and tribes to go through, was the severance and removal from the lands that all their ancestors were buried there. That's the land where they knew how to make a living, the land where they knew, they could gather materials, just like this willow right here that's growing by the riverside. They knew where all those things were in their homeland. So they were forced to leave all of that, their home for thousands and thousands of years, and go to this reservation that they didn't know. That said, they were able, starting in about the 1870s, to obtain passes from the Indian agent there at Grand Ronde. So the tribe is lucky enough that it actually got some of the pass books on loan, and I've been able to look through some of these old pass books. They're written in pencil, and yeah, different groups of tribal people on the reservation, because they weren't allowed to leave. So if they left without a pass, they were fair game to be shot by settlers with no punishment for that. So, but having a pass from the Indian agent meant that they could have, free passage to their homelands, and not be legally targeted anyway. And the Lukiamute River was one of the places where tribal people would get passes to go. Sometimes the Willamette River landings between here and Salem were places where tribal people would get passes. And then people that live around here probably know, like, Willamette Falls is the place that was most often applied for a pass, because that was a place where the fish and the lamprey and a lot of the resources were really, really plentiful. So people all needed to go there. A lot of hardship faced the tribal people after being removed to the reservation. I won't be able to do the story justice here, but the tribe went through so much in such a relatively short span of time. So in 1954, right about 100 years after this Willamette Valley Treaty was signed, the Congress passed the Termination Act, the Western Oregon Termination Act. So that once again was a hugely traumatic event for the tribe, and it was the removal of all services to Indian people that were covered under that Termination Act, and the loss of recognition. And as a result, a lot of the tribal people had to leave the reservation and go find work in the cities or elsewhere. Today, even Grand Ronde tribal members are found in all 50 states and in at least a dozen different countries around the globe, because of that diaspora that the Termination Act caused. Again, I won't be able to do the story justice, but 30 years after that Termination Act was passed, the tribe, after decades of hard work, was restored as a federally recognized tribe, and that's where the tribe is at today. And the tribe is, piece by piece, slowly reacquiring not all parts of its homelands, but the parts of its homelands that are the most special and have the most promise of being returned to a pre-settler condition. So one example of that, just one, is right across the river from us, we have the mouth of the Santiam River. And if you go up the Santiam, and especially up the North Fork of the Santiam, there's a lot of creation stories. There's just a wealth of tribal information, tribal cultural resources, and then also, just a lot of high opportunity land parcels that have been relatively unimpacted by modern day development. So the tribe has worked really, really hard to reacquire, get the funding, get the partners from the area, because the tribe knows it's not in this game alone. It's not doing this alone. It takes a lot of work by a lot of different people to make the restoration happen. So I want to say on the North Santiam, the tribe today has somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 acres of land, specifically for restoration, and which is something that I'm really proud of. Those are places I really, really enjoy visiting, and it's great to see tribal members back on those homelands again, fishing and gathering plants and you know, doing all the things that their ancestors did. Overall, I think the tribe has acquired, gosh, it's at least 4,000, maybe 5,000 or so acres of its homelands since the time that I got first hired by the tribe, which is, you know, by like federal standards, that's not a lot of land, but for the tribe, it's a really, really special thing to be able to own and manage the same places that their ancestors lived, you know, for thousands and thousands of years, the places that all the stories talk about, the places where they can go today, they can paddle the tribal canoes, they can do all of those practices that, you know, today maybe are kind of, by some people, maybe taken for granted, but you know, definitely there was at least 100 years there, maybe more, where tribal people weren't allowed, for one reason or another, just not allowed to exercise those practices like canoeing, like dip net fishing, gathering plant materials. A lot of times singing and drumming weren't allowed. The tribal languages weren't allowed for a long time, and those are making a comeback too. And so, yeah, the names of things are starting to come back, and people are starting to talk more about the names of the rivers, the names of the places, the names of the plants that grow along the river. It's in the native languages, which is really, really cool to see. It's really a rebirth of tribal culture, and it's, for me, a non-tribal member, it's just something that I'm really, really blessed to witness it. Yeah. So one thing I'm gonna say is it's never too late. You know, whether you think it's, you know, too late in your life, or whether you think it's too late in the, you know, de-evolution of mankind, or whatever you want to call it, like, it's not too late. There's definitely you can point to at least 4 moments in the history of tribal people right here. You know, the Kalapuyans right here had 4 different points in their history where they just absolutely had every reason to believe that they were not going to live through it. Like, they seriously, and the United States wanted them to believe that, right? They wanted them, when they wrote the treaties, they wanted them to believe you and your children are the last of your kind. There's not going to be any more tribe after you're gone. This is it, you know. So, you know, we're not going to negotiate a really big reservation or a lot of stuff, because we're not going to have too many people to consider, which is a horrible thing to say, but at the time it sure seemed that way to everyone. And you know, of course, now 150 plus years later, it's like nothing could be further from the truth. There are lots of tribal people alive today. They are keeping their ancestors' traditions alive. I, for one, am really glad that they didn't die out, that they are, you know, alive and thriving today. So it's never too late. There's never, even though it might seem like a time in history is just without hope, that's not the case. What else can I say? There's a million different things people can do. One of the coolest parts of my job is meeting people like Willamette River Keeper, meeting people that work at the various partner organizations that the tribe has. And, you know, what I've learned through that is there are just a million different ways to donate your time. You don't have to have money. You don't even have to have a whole lot of spare time. I mean, most organizations that I come into contact with, they're really, really happy to take whatever you can give, whether it's a little bit or a lot. So don't think that just because if you're not like a wildlife expert, or you're not a river scientist, or you're not like super athletic, you know, river paddler person or whatever, don't think that you can't be useful, because everyone has something. Everyone has something to give. And even if you're super busy, I know my calendar is always completely full, but even little bits of time, the partner organizations of the tribe would really love to have little bits of everyone's time. So don't be a defeatist and just say, oh well, I couldn't get involved in that because that would take up too much of my time. No, a little bit of time can be a really, really needed and necessary thing. What else did I want to say? You know, for me, people ask me like, how do you know so much about the tribes of this area? And for me, I'm really lucky. Like, I was working for the tribe already as a forester. A job opened up called Ceded Lands. I applied for it, got the job, and immediately just began immersing myself into all kinds of different written works. They're not all 100% accurate, the written stuff that's out there, but it's still better than nothing. And what I'm here to say is anyone can become a scholar of tribal culture. I would recommend, you know, read as much as you can, but also recognize 98% of the books that you find, they were written by white men, 98% of them. So, you know, take that for what it's worth, but also as much as you can, if you can respectfully talk with tribal members today. It's not something that tribal people, because of past trauma, they don't really open up immediately to strangers about their culture a lot of times. But if you can, through, you know, your time and your attention and your honest sincerity, if you can develop a relationship with a tribal person, you know, they're definitely the biggest and best source of information of all. And I know there aren't, population-wise, there aren't a whole lot of tribal members out there, but most of the modern-day tribal governments have some kinds of online resources that you can learn more. And a lot of tribal events are open to the public. All of the competition powwows are open to the public, so I would say take advantage of those where you can. And then on top of that, a lot of modern day tribal governments open up a certain set of their ceremonial things to the public. So one example is like at Grand Ronde, they celebrate the tribal plank house has a birthday, and every year they celebrate that birthday in the plank house, and that's an event that's open to the public, and you can learn a lot from that, just from watching and listening. So those kind of three messages, I know I've gone at great length on each one of them, but those are the kinds of things that I would want to pass on to people.